Hello, friends, and welcome to Flourish Writers. I am Mindy Kiker, together with Jennifer Kokert. We love to see you flourish in your writing life, one story at a time. And what a thrill to be here today with my good friend and fellow author, Nikki S. White. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, thank you.
I am super excited to share about Nikki's new book, Mom, Me, and Jesus, an unlikely love story of two broken hearts and one miracle working God. Nikki, you did it.
Oh, I don't even know how it happened. Yes.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about
Oh,
today,
good.
how
Good.
it happened. So you're going to get to take us through some of the stages of just how this did become possible. Because I know lots of people are going to share this conversation with us today who are where you were when this was just a seed of an idea.
Mhm.
Nikki blogs at justabrokenbeliever.com. So I hope you take a chance to look her up there and see all that she has poured into her community there. And today we're going to chat about how this writing life created a book. Super, super exciting. So, Nikki, how long had you been dreaming of writing this book?
It began in 2021. And I remember, not to sound too strange about it, but I remember the moment it happened. I was at a Flourish Writers Conference in Cincinnati, and we were doing a writing exercise, trying to find kind of what's on our hearts and what the Lord was calling us to. And through a series of questions and answers, it came out that I was to write this book. So I remember it so clearly that moment.
That's amazing. So that's a few years back, Nikki.
Yes, and I know.
Oh, not to say that it took a long time, but just to
It did.
acknowledge that from the germ of an idea, we hear about some people writing really fast, and we try to ignore those stories
Yes.
because that
Yes.
sounds like super improbable. But I think your time frame is very realistic, quite frankly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you wanted to write a book. That's why you were at Flourish Writers, I'm guessing, or you can tell us why you were at Flourish Writers. But did you have a lot of topics competing for this first book idea? And how did you choose this one?
Yes. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to write a book right away, but I was learning how to write. I was learning about the craft of writing and plugging myself into the writing community and kind of finding out what this was all about because I really didn't start writing till seriously till the end of 2019. So I was pretty new to writing and knew I needed to learn a lot and make some friends, which I did. So, but the topics that were competing were not right at first, but as I started writing the story and as I started writing my first draft, I discovered many other topics pop up and it made me doubt uh, what direction I was going in.
That is such a common problem, Nikki. And I think a lot of people never get to this stage of holding the book in their hands because they actually jump from project to project because it's like the grass is greener on the other side kind of
Mm-hmm.
problem. And the one I'm working on is getting hard.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. And I did want to do what God was telling me to do. And a lot of times, my overthinking, I can question, but I kept coming back to that moment when God told me to write the story about my mom and myself. So
Yeah.
I kept having to kind of come back to that. And I think I spent a lot of time on my knees throughout this whole process.
Yeah, but that's a really good point to remember too. And that's part of where like a faith-based writing community can really
Mhm.
help because I'm sure that just constant pointing back to, well, what are you hearing from the Lord?
Mhm.
We need a community that keeps us on our knees as
Yes,
well.
for sure.
Did you know that this book was going to be a memoir?
I did. I didn't know what kind of memoir it would be. After I did a little exploring, I found out there's different types of memoir, and it felt like my story, the timeline felt very short to me, and it also kind of felt like a non-story story. It wasn't like one of those adventure memoirs or, some of those epic things that you read about. Mine was probably a little bit more internal. Um, Between my mom and I, it wasn't real apparent. So that had me questioning it. So I started exploring, should I do a devotional memoir or should I do, maybe I should fictionalize this and make, and, where I'm able to embellish maybe more on my mother's story, which I didn't know a lot about.
Did you attempt any of those other kinds of writing?
I attempted everything. I feel like I have probably written 10 books, and to arrive at this one. But I did. I started writing the fictionalized version of my mother's story. She grew up in the south side of Chicago, a very impoverished situation, but she really hid it. And so I didn't know a whole lot about it until after she had passed. So then I was able I thought, well, I'm going to fictionalize this. And I started doing a little research and that actually came real easy to me. And that actually seemed, for lack of a better word, fun. Like I felt like it was the right way to go. But then I realized that I was telling my mom's story and I really needed to tell my story. And because that one felt the most true. That one I knew for sure I could accurately, tell because it was my story.
Ooh, interesting. Actually, a thought comes to mind, which is sometimes the different directions that you go in the early stages of a book development project can yield ideas and even content that can be future books.
Hmm.
So maybe that fictionalizing of your mom's story is coming, Nikki.
Maybe don't hit the delete button is what you're saying.
Oh, please
Don't
don't.
clean the
Yeah.
files.
Don't always save all that stuff. And nothing is wasted because that journey that you take in the ideation process is going to yield, if not actual words that you'll share with others, it yields a deepening of your understanding of what it is you're trying to say. So
I
it's not
completely
wasted.
agree. Yes.
Yeah. So you had been blogging for a
Hmm.
while and you had, I remember in one of our coaching calls, you had almost too much you had a lot of content. Like you were blessed and cursed with a lot of content. And some people who don't have a lot of writing done think, how could that be a curse? Oh, well, but then you have like almost too much to sort through. There are so
Hmm.
many great little stories and vignettes. One of the challenge of memoir is it's not an autobiography. You are
No.
not writing all the stories of you and your mom together. You're
Hmm.
building an argument in the literary sense
Hmm.
of a theme, a point that you're wanting to get to. So you are curating, you are selecting the stories that you want to share. So, how did you decide which stories belonged in this book? And how did you structure that narrative arc?
Um, how did I decide? I narrowed I narrowed many of my blogs are involve my dad actually.
Oh,
For whatever reason, I'm able to write about my dad quite easily, and the ones with my mom um, were centered around this time more than anything. And so I kind of had to reach down and write some more content to come up with these scenes. But I did try to stick to simplify it to scenes between my mother and I, which the ones that kind of rang true in my heart, both the painful ones and the happy ones. And as far as a narrative arc went, um, I almost felt like I knew enough to be dangerous. I don't know. It all kind of came together. But one of the things I did was I wrote on index cards the scenes and I laid them out according to maybe group them together, like my transformation, I went from being a selfish person to someone that was more outward focused. And so I would lay down the scenes um, according to that transformation. But there were several transformations that occurred, so it was kind of hard to narrow it all down. But um, the scenes themselves helped me with my flashbacks, but the story itself was such a short time frame that I was able just to pull out those scenes and tell that story and then use the flashbacks to insert and to elaborate maybe a little bit more.
Hmm. Yeah, you had just share with people who are listening how the story is structured around just these few days in the hospital together.
Mhm.
Just give us a little brief of how you used that as your organizing structure, but then you got a lot of and we're going to talk about your flashbacks more, but just that gave you the main organizing principle was just these
Mhm.
few days.
Yes, yes. Um, because when I walked into the door of the hospital, I walked in as one person, and 5 days later, I walked out as another person. It was a miracle, and I can't quite describe it all and say that all those things happened during those days in time. But I think as I started to tell the story, I realized that God had been working and doing those things all along. It appeared to be a 5 day miracle, but it really was he'd been faithful all along, and he had been planting those seeds and working in my heart and my mom's heart the whole time.
Yeah. When you're writing, so you had the writing process itself led to this discovery. And that's one of the
Mhm.
things that can be a little hard to figure out as we're working on a bigger project is the message that you want to share. And we start off with an idea of a message, but then as we're writing, we almost learn about the story as we're writing it. So
Mhm.
how did that happen for you? Did you have to adjust anything as it became clearer? Did that change your relationship with the drafts that you were writing?
I had to expand a little bit to capture just before I found out about my mom's diagnosis, and then till the end. And they also expanded it on the end, another chapter outside of the timeline as well, just so everything would kind of wrap up together. Because the 5 days in the hospital, that was very intense, very sad. There was a lot of trauma that happened, that there were a lot of things that moments I didn't remember. So even trying to piece all that together was difficult to make an entire book out of that.
Did you speak to other people to try to fill in some of those gaps, or did memories come back as you were writing about it, or both, probably?
Both,
Yeah.
both. Um, it's funny because the memory can really play tricks on you. I was working really hard to insert a scene of when my children came up to visit me in the hospital, and working. I could not fit it in, and then I just happened to talk to my husband. I said, "When exactly did you bring the children up to see me?" And he goes, "I never brought the children up to see you. You said that you were worried about them. You didn't want them to come up there." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I consulted you." So yes, so there's a lot of that. And there were a lot of people there in the hospital room with us that maybe had some different perspectives on things too. And I had to be careful to stay true to what I remembered but also listening to them kind of fill in the blanks and maybe a few of the details.
Yes, and you're describing a very real dance for memoir writers, which is I am sharing my story of of my relationship with my mom and these 5 intense days that we spent at the end of her life in the hospital. And my memories might not completely concur with all the other people who were there,
Mhm.
And so I always say, especially with memoir, any personal story writing, you're not writing a police report. You're not trying to get all the facts straight so that you can present a case in a court of law. You are sharing your story. And if any of the other people who feature in that story contend with what you've written, you can offer that they can go write their version.
Which I have done, and no one has contested anything I've
Mhm.
said. Um, but I would never want to offend anyone, and I did try. I avoided all those. There were moments where I could have written in some other things that I just chose to keep aside, just to keep peace, and the story was still told. I never wanted it to um, have any negative connotation. I wanted to show God's redemption there.
Yes. Yeah. So you're picking and choosing stories. You don't have to include nobody's
No.
forcing you to include everything that could be a sticking point or cause contention. Or depending on your purpose, maybe you do. You know that it's
Yes,
not to
that's
say
true.
that you have to uh, soften everything that could cause contention. For
Right.
some people's story, that might perfectly well fit in, and that might be something they feel called to do.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Mhm. So, Nikki, you mentioned flashbacks. You are the master of flashbacks, and you use them throughout the book because the timeline of the book is this largely this 5 days in the hospital, but then woven into that, you are telling a lot of your childhood story and youth and all through the decades with your mom. So, first of all, I don't know if you just want to tell us a little bit about how you design flashbacks or read us a few examples. You can read some examples and tell us, but just get us into your writerly technique here for this.
Okay.
It's such a great feature of your writing.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying I'm a master because I don't feel I think that's just how I think because one of the things I love most is seeing how God has prepared us in the past and connecting it to our current situation or I don't know why, but I just love that. I love connecting the dots. And so I think I naturally, maybe my mind naturally does that. So I don't know if I'm a master or I'm just doing what's convenient for me because I like it. I don't know.
Well, it works.
Well, thank you. When I was thinking though, with flashbacks, what I have something I've learned, and I'm not sure if I heard it somewhere. I've listened to so many podcasts and had so many wise words and wise counsel. But for a flashback, you always want the story to be moving forward. And so we were driving home from our cabin yesterday, and we were going down I-75, and it's a straight shot. But there, we have I-75, and then when traffic backs up, sometimes our Waze app will say you need to go around. So then we will get off and we will go on 475, for example, and it'll take us around, but then we will end up ahead. We will still end up further ahead than we were at the beginning. So that's what I think flashbacks need to be used for is just to move the story forward, to give information, but also to move it forward, not to go back too much, because I think that's confusing to the reader, and you don't want to confuse the reader. I'm confusing enough as it is. I don't want my writing to be confusing too.
No, that's a great analogy. And yes, it's always about the story. And you don't want the reader to feel that the flashback is stalling out the story. You
Yes,
want them to feel that the flashback is providing insight, information, connection, like your joy of connecting the dots, that is going to enrich their understanding and propel the story forward.
yes, yes. So I found the shortest flashback that I have in the book,
Awesome.
and I wanted to share it. Um, let's see. So this this flashback starts when I have a phone call from my dad, and I have to make a decision whether I'm going to the hospital. My husband's trying to decide whether he should cancel his trip that his business trip that he has. So let me start here. I was fully waking up to the reality of the situation. I'll call my mom. You need to go. But so did my husband. I can cancel, he said. I knew he could and would, but I thought he shouldn't. This could be another false alarm, and our marriage had experienced more than its share. So then I flash back to this, excuse me, pitch black and soundproof, the hotel room promised a good night's rest until the fire alarm rang. A flashing red light on the ceiling announced there'd be no rest for the weary or the wicked. From reading the hotel guide earlier, I knew guests must calmly proceed to the parking lot. If you can find it, that is. You've got to be kidding me, Chuck mumbled, trying to put on his pants as I groped through the shapes of clothes in our carry-on, hoping to encounter something decent to wear. Wait! We collided head on. What the? I need my purse. It had our credit cards and my lipstick, everything we need to rebuild our life after the hotel burned it to the ground. Time was of the essence. The alarm blared louder and faster, urging us to exit quickly and quietly down the stairs, single file. I grabbed hold of the tail of Chuck's t-shirt, letting him lead, but he couldn't find the door. We ricocheted like pinballs, corner to corner, tripping over a basket and shoes. I stayed on his heel like a dog on a bone. We were in this together for better or worse, for richer or poor, for the rest of our days, which were probably ending that night. When the all clear was given, we laughed until I cried, thinking how true it was that a good crisis reveals what's most important to you. The first thing you grab is what you think you need to survive. And then after the flashback, I came back into the scene and I said, I didn't have time to cry or the luxury of riding Chuck's coattails through today's confusion. It was time to go through the fire alone.
Ooh, that's so good. I love
Thank
it.
you.
So when you're designing that, Nikki, first of all, let's just admire also you're injecting some humor into a very hard and difficult situation because that for all of us who are writing hard stories, that's a super important takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
And your little, your little bit of sort of self-deprecating, my keys and my lipstick, all I need to
Yes.
do to rebuild my life. That's super fun. And it also just helps us to connect with you as, a funny person and a real girl who has her obsessions.
Yes. And that is one of them.
And you do reveal through the pages of the story that that is a trait passed down from your mama.
It really is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're designing this flashback, so you're writing, you're there, you're telling us the story, and then is there a point where you pause and ask yourself, is this like something I've experienced before? Could I illuminate this situation with a little story from the past? Or is that truly just like you said, it's the way your brain works? Is it that you're writing along and then all of a sudden you recall this encounter or this experience?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think a little bit it comes naturally, and then there are other places where I chose to put a flashback, and I tried to structure the chapters very similar. So I think there was probably only one chapter that didn't have a flashback. It was actually a flashback in itself. Um, so that's how I handled it.
And then in the editing process, I know you worked with Jill Wilson,
Hmm.
one of our uh, great Flourish Writers editor who happens around Flourish Writers quite often.
Yes.
Did was that something that she helped? Did she have to tend to any of that? Did you learn anything about this art of flashbacking in that editing process?
Jenny White was my developmental editor, so I
She
actually
took
went.
care of most of that.
Yes. So I went back to her actually twice after she
Okay.
had sent the first round of edits. It was so helpful because she just, being from the outside in, we have that knowledge, the writer's knowledge that we don't even realize we have. And she had many questions, and she would have some suggestions of when to possibly take something out or insert something there or try to find something that would connect.
Ooh, so that's a very good takeaway for, people who are coming along behind, working on their first book or thinking about it, is that working with an editor and many of you may know, but a developmental editor comes in earlier in the project and helps you work on the big picture
Mhm.
items. And
Yeah.
so there was Ginny, love Ginny White. She's amazing, and she's such a brilliant developmental editor to come in and help you see where perhaps, as you mentioned before, those flashbacks are actually interfering with the story.
Yes.
Mhm. And so that's a
Yes.
developmental editor. And then later, once you get everything pretty much where it needs to be, you have fulfilled your promise to the reader. You don't have any bunny trails that are heading away from moving the story forward. Then you work on, polishing that language, and that's where your copy editor comes.
Yes. Yes. And that's what Jill did for me. She actually did copy edit, and she also was so gracious in helping me with some developmental things as well.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Yes.
she's an all-rounder.
Yes,
She
she sure is.
she can do it all. Oh, that's awesome. So, well done, Nikki. It's a
Thank you.
delightful part of your voice. And if somebody is wanting an instruction manual on how to do that, Nikki, you've done it well. And it's a
Oh,
delight to
thank
read
you.
different writers who have different strengths to try to incorporate some of those things into our own writers' toolboxes.
Yes.
So, just stepping back from the writing process in general, what would you say are some of the best and worst parts?
The best and worst. The best is the green lights, right? The green lights that God gives you, the open roads, the pedal to the metal, the like the all this information downloading and you're typing and um that's obviously the best. That sharing it with a community is so wonderful because they are just as excited for you. Um, Even more so just knowing and being able to relate to team being writers themselves. I just really love that. I was thinking about the friends that God used even to shepherd the story and help me. Um, Early on in this journey, there was a group that met on Zoom, and one of the writers became a friend of mine, Michelle, and I was going on and on saying, I just don't have a story. And that's a lie, actually. The enemy um, said to me many, many, many times, you do not have a story. You have a boring life. You have no story. You know, but that's something I always struggled with. And I said maybe I should be writing my mother's story. Her challenges were greater, and but I don't really know enough. And she looked at me and she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Nikki, your mother's story is your story." She said, "It we are
Mm.
so intertwined, mothers and daughters." And even when she said that later on, when it was time to um, really maybe make a deadline, and I had so many stoplights along the way where I felt like I couldn't, and obstacles I felt like I couldn't overcome. And even going back to when she said that to me, it helped me realize that I wanted to write this for my daughter. And so when I dedicated it to her, and she's grown and she's got two little girls and a third one little girl on the way. And when I realized that the generational blessing that could be, and that my mom's story is my story and it's also her story. That really kind of also put some gas in the gas tank.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes.
And what about the publishing process?
Oh, the publishing process. Well, I set a deadline. I wanted to have this story out. I decided to self-publish. The more that I looked into traditional publishing. I didn't look too hard into it because it
Mhm.
seemed to me I'd taken so long to write it already that I didn't think I could wait another 3 to 5 years to get the story out. It was almost like I just had to keep going. So I decided to self-publish it, but make it look as if um, as professional as possible. That was really important to me. So, the self-publishing process, I set the deadline for December 13th, which was the day that my mom had passed. And then I had made a plan to hand it to my daughter. And she knew I was writing something. She didn't really know what was happening. So, um, so when I presented that to her and put that in her hands, it wasn't a moment that was recorded but it's just forever recorded in my heart. She opened it and she thought I'd given her some book from Target. She goes, "Oh, thank you." And then she looked at it, she goes, "Wait, this is your book." And then she opened it and saw it was dedicated to her. And that was just such a special moment because um, this book also came from just such a desire in my heart. I had always wanted to connect with my mom, and then I noticed that as I was a mother to a daughter, that I was having trouble connecting with her. So God's just so amazing how he just takes one little thing and he just does so much with it. And so that was really that was the part of the publishing that was the very best. And then once I put it out there and decided to announced that I had a book. I think a friend of mine may have announced it before I did, which kind of got me off the dime. It's like, oh, I better do something because I was just trying to do like a slow reveal. And it did feel a little bit like walking around naked. Like I felt very exposed and I was really worried about being misunderstood. And I just had to continue to give that to the Lord and just go back to the original time when he told me to write it and just know that it was his story. Even though it was my story, it was his story. So, and I thought if something comes up, I just know he's going to give me wisdom to deal with it and he'll use it.
Yes. And that fear is very real, especially when you're sharing a personal and private story. You have gone deep into your heart and the inner workings of your relationship with your mom. And that wasn't an easy relationship. And it did have a
No.
lot of heartache and a lot of, confusion and regret. And you shared with us, some of your more rebellious moments.
Yes, the swearing. Yes, I that was another thing with the publishing. Our pastor has been very kind in promoting the book, and it went up, I believe, on our church website, and I had to write in and say, "Alert, alert! There are three swear words in here," so right that people would get it and just be shocked. I didn't want to offend anybody, but I mean, it was a true story, so I did have to tell, and that was at the earlier part of the book, not the end.
It was. You weren't recommending it. But I'm
No.
I'm glad that you put that in there because uh, we want to write as truthfully as we can. And that was accurate, I'm assuming, to what the place you were at. And you don't want to whitewash that too much.
No, and I have a tendency, and so did my mom, to whitewash,
Hmm.
to put on a perfect facade, to smile
Yeah.
and play the game, and inside you might be dying inside or having a really bad day, but you feel like you can't be vulnerable like that. So that's another thing that came from this. It was so important to me to just to reveal the truth because I think that's how you connect with other people. People are not going to connect with the perfect version of you. They're only going to connect with the real human side of you.
Yes, absolutely. Did you share with us the worst part of the publishing process?
I think it was the walking around naked.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yep,
And
that's pretty tough.
that's a tough one. And also, oh, asking for the reviews.
Oh,
And people were so kind with their private messages, but then it felt so disingenuous to say, "Oh, could you please leave a review on Amazon?" It almost sounded like I was trying to promote myself, but I had to remember that it's really about promoting the message and wanting it to get into people's hands that might be touched by it. I had to kind of change my thinking with that. And I'm still struggling with it.
yes, and let me just encourage you and everyone who is listening, there is nothing disingenuous about that. It's just the reality. And I've
Mm,
actually found that most people are honored when you want to share what they wrote. They like that. Now, if they wrote a very personal message to you that reveals something about themselves,
right.
sure, then that's not what we're talking about. But somebody who praises what you did and then you say, "Hey, could I share this?" They're actually delighted. They feel special and they feel that they have provided something to you that is of value. It's like
Mm.
a way that they can say thank you for all that you put into this writing process. So, I encourage you.
Oh, thank you.
And Nikki, despite your fears of negative feedback, you have actually been quite overwhelmed with all the kindness and generosity. And even as we were jumping on here,
Hmm.
somebody texted you saying
Yes,
thank
yes,
you.
yes, yes. Yes, I've been very humbled by the messages that I've received, and it seems to be very unexpected things. Like, for example, people that have come up to me that I didn't even know they knew about my book, but they said that they've read my book. They were up to 1:30 in the morning and crying and with Kleenex, and but then they're like, I connected so much with this journey. I understand what you were saying. This was my story, so I keep hearing everyone else's story too. Now it's bringing their stories out, and isn't that what defeats the enemy? Is when we tell our stories, in the redemption through Jesus's blood. It's like that, and so it's going to be a spiritual battle. I guess we're always going to be opposed.
Yeah.
So it's good to remember that it's for any little things that you might think oh, I'm just being humble or something. Just remember that the enemy will try to use anything to stop your story.
Oh, yes. And once it's out there, it doesn't end. In
Hmm.
fact, there's plenty more to come. But in the midst of that, you receive so much joy and blessing as
Yes,
well.
yes,
And
yes,
that's
yes.
fantastic.
I actually haven't received I haven't received any negative
Yeah.
things back. I I know I feel like I shouldn't even say that, but just people have been very have connected deeply, and I think maybe
Yeah.
also because I tend to not be as vulnerable back in the past, they were maybe surprised at the story. I think my mom and I did a really good job maybe of covering
Oh,
it all up. And so even my aunt who appears in the story made a comment that she had no idea. She thought we had the perfect family, which I thought was kind of
oh.
sad and also funny because she was in the book. So we fooled
What
her too.
what I really love about what you've done as well, Nikki, is that you have honored your mother.
Mm,
And so you've shared hard realities that, quite frankly, your mom would not have wanted people to
yeah,
know,
that's true.
but you haven't shared it in such a way that it is at all shaming. And
No, no.
that shows your heart. We have to get to a place where we have really made peace and forgiven when we're
Oh,
writing those hard stories, or it will come out with kind of a tainted uh,
mhm,
sound to it.
mhm.
Mm.
Yes, they're really God really did do a healing in me, and that's what this story was about. But then, yes, to tell it was a little bit hard to go back at the beginning and go through the story again, and it felt a little I I don't humbly said that convicting like, oh, and then it also helped me see my mom's viewpoint even more when I was writing about myself and recognizing what I was doing and then seeing it from her viewpoint. But the best thing that happened at the end of this, is it okay to share
Oh, yeah.
as far as the writing parts?
Yeah.
Um, I went through the developmental edit process twice. After I went through once, I felt like Ginny didn't like she didn't think the beginning was good, and so I decided to expand it and I pulled in my mom's story with her own mother because it really was a generational um, occurrence that was happening between mothers and daughters in our family. And so when I went back and pulled that in, it was like the Lord had laid this beautiful template over all the words that had been missing, and then it all like it was almost like a filter, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this it all, like all weaved together and the way the Lord did it. And then at the end I added a chapter at the end, and I knew it was the last chapter, and as I was typing it, I was in a little cabin, like like you see in those movies. I was literally in a little cabin with the internet. And I was typing away. And as I typed, I realized like I felt like I was typing for both my mom and myself. And that we were just I use this terminology a couple times, like just spitting in the devil's eye. Like my mom had such a hard time, and she and I had such a hard time, but we had the victory because of what the Lord did for us, and just how he redeemed it. And at the end, I just threw up my arms. I was just like, glory to God. I just, I just felt the tears come, and I just knew, like, I felt like I'd done right by my mother too, not, and I had told her story too because she couldn't tell it. And even though I didn't tell it, I told part of it.
Yes. Oh, that it's so inspiring, the journey that you go through in the
Mhm.
writing before the book is even out in the world. And
Yes.
I love how you remind us that we get a good draft out. I mean, before you gave that to Ginny, you had worked on it a
Hmm.
lot.
Yes. Yeah. I did two drafts, I think, before I finally, or maybe even three.
And then Ginny says it still doesn't begin quite right and it still doesn't end quite right. You're like, what in the world are you talking about? But then it improved the product. And that's what a
Hmm.
good developmental editor can do for you, is help you really hone that message so that the reader will catch it. And then in
Hmm.
so doing, you were able to highlight and even see for yourself even more clearly that generational reverberation that was coming down through
Hmm.
the family
Yeah.
line and
Yes.
changing in the relationship that you have with your daughter, which is
Yes.
that's the redemption.
Yes. Oh, I love redemption stories too. They're my
Hmm.
favorite.
Hmm. So I wanted us to read a couple passages just for people to get to enjoy a little bit of your writing. And am I going to read mine first?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is from chapter 15. Enjoy your life. And do you want to lead us into what where this passage falls in terms of the story line?
Yes. I was in the hospital, and my mom and I had several private moments as my people came in and out, and this was one of our private moments after we had spent a couple days together in the hospital.
Okay. Sorry, this is all you got, Mom. I wanted to say, I wish I were more. Her cool hand reached out and rested on mine. I pulled my eyes away from the thick needle piercing her hand's tissue-thin skin. She'd threaded many needles in her day, squinting to find entry to the impossible. How many Saturday afternoons had Mom taken that same hand and smoothed a new piece of gingham, preparing to pin a pattern on me that I resented? All I wanted was to run out the screen door and into the sunshine, yet she held me captive to make something lovely that I couldn't envision at the time. It occurred to me that's the way of mothers and daughters. Every fitting takes too long and holds the possibility of all your best efforts being ripped out by the seams when the results are disappointing. Love's work is messy, with uneven stitches and fallen hems, but it's love that binds us together in the end. Grasping Mom's weakened hand, I decided I'd now prefer gingham over any other fabric as long as I lived.
Mm.
Oh,
And I
Nikki.
do. I really do.
Oh. Oh, that's amazing. I love your word pictures, how you take that metaphor. This was a big thing. Your mom was a seamstress and she did beautiful work,
Mhm.
and you use that throughout as a wonderful metaphor to bring us back to thank you for that beautiful
Oh,
passage.
well, you read it so well. Thank you. Made
Mhm.
it sound better than it was. Thank you.
So what are you going to share with us?
Um, I I want to share a funnier one. This was also a scene in the hospital, but I did a little bit of a flashback to talk about my new enthusiasm for I was in going to Bible study, and I was rediscovering um, the scripture and my faith and struggling to share it. And so this is where I will start. I struggle to curb my enthusiasm, announcing my weekly findings at the dinner table. Pouring this cranberry juice reminds me how Jesus poured out his love for us on the cross. Ooh, gross, Mom. How am I supposed to drink this now? Well, Jesus drank the cup even when he didn't want to, you know. The kid's glazed eyes made me want to cry. I had no idea how to pass the faith along now that I held it in my hands. And then I came out of the flashback and I came back into the room with my mom and the scene and I said, maybe it was time to confess. I'm a terrible mother. I covered my face with my hands. Lately, the kids don't even want to go to church. Mom stared down at her hands, clearly looking for words to help me. Then she looked up and shook her head. No, Nikki, you're a wonderful mother. One day you'll see. Did she see? Did she know that after all her failed attempts to perfection, she was the perfect mother for me?
Mm.
I guess it was kind of funny, kind of sad.
It's kind of funny, kind of sad, I'm not gonna lie. But you do a great job of juxtaposing those and actually connecting them throughout the piece. You go back and forth between real heart tugging and humorous observations. That
Oh,
is a
thank you.
gift.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for as we conclude, what would you say to another writer who's coming along behind you, maybe still with the post-it notes all over the wall, still muddled in, one of the yet another chapter, and is it coming out right? How do you want to encourage them?
Oh, I definitely want to encourage you. I'm I've run 3 marathons and I'm really not a marathon runner, but I feel like it's the same way with writing. I discovered once I ran my first marathon, everybody can do it. Everyone that wants to run a marathon really can, even with physical disabilities. There are ways to run a marathon. Um, Everyone runs it differently. Everyone has their own gait, but you are able to do it. You just have to strap your shoes on every day and write. You have to put that pencil and paper out and write and not give up. And even though it seems like a waste, it seems like there's going to be hard times. You're going to fall flat on your face. But when you cross the finish line, it's worth it. And you do realize that it was the Lord that got you over that finish line. I mean, you can't really even cobble together how that course even came. It was just he set the course for us. And I would just, if the Lord's put a book on your heart, I would definitely say, don't give up. Please don't give up. And call me if you're thinking of giving up. I will talk you out of it.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. Nikki White, me, mom, and Jesus. Nikki writes at justabrokenbeliever.com. I hope you connect with her. And when you said call me, do you think people could contact you through your website, like genuine, for real?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. There's an area there, contact page.
Yes.
I would love to hear from everyone.
So reach out to Nikki if you are struggling. She will pray for you. And if you have any questions from anything that we've shared here, you can give her a call, drop her a line, an email line, and she'll get back to you. You can also reach out to us at flourishwriters.com. We can help you out with a thing or two. Nikki, what a joy it has been to
Thank you,
discuss
Nancy.
your project here with you. And thank you for finding Flourish Writers. I'm so grateful that the Lord connected us here.
I am too. I am so grateful for Flourish Writers. You gave me such a firm foundation. Really, just I can I tell a really quick thing?
Of
So
course.
so when I first joined Flourish Writers, this is true. I was like, you're like, okay, we're gonna do planning, we're gonna pray, we're going to read the scripture, and I'm like, no, wait, what's going on? I need to write. I need to get writing. Like I was so chomping at the bit. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's so embarrassing now, but really that is where it starts. That is where the writing begins is the Lord. He is the Holy Spirit that inspires us and I'm so grateful that is the way that Flourish Writers conducts themselves and encourages others. So thank you.
So we were holding you back, but it was all for the best.
No, you never held me back. If anything, you pushed me, you helped me.
Oh, that's so good. And that's such a great place to finish, Nikki, because it really is that connection to the Lord that keeps this all going because it's in obedience. We're
Hmm.
not just writing for the heck of it, but it really is a story of redemption. You know, whatever it is you share, it takes all different kinds of forms, all different kinds of flourish writers are writing all different kinds of things. But it is a project that initiates from a Holy Spirit breathed desire to share a message of hope. So we're thrilled to get to help people do that. So thank you for being with us. It is Me, Mom, and Jesus with Nikki White. And thanks for being at Flourish Writers today. All the best. Here's to flourishing in your writing life, one story at a time. Bye for now.